for letting us speak. Many of the crowd probably know me, and many of them have probably phoned me. What I'm here to do today is explain to you why we have the attitude or stance that we do about this issue, explain a little bit of the background, a little bit of science. I will try to address some of the concerns that Senator Kreitlow and Representative Dano mentioned in their opening remarks, and then we'll address some of the things that we think are flaws in the bill. First of all, just a little bit of self-introduction. My career has been as a food safety microbiologist. I've studied and worked with many of the organisms I'll talk about in the laboratory, primarily in a meat industry setting. But I know for sure that these are not just trivial organisms that cause a bellyache and maybe a little bit of time in the bathroom. They can be deadly. They can put people in the hospital. They can have lifelong consequences. So that's where I'm coming from right at the outset, is as a microbiologist who's concerned about food safety. As Randy mentioned, our division's first and foremost priority is protecting public health and safety, and we think that these bills do not adequately allow us to do that. From a public health perspective, we do consider raw milk and raw milk products to be high risk. Raw milk can contain several types of disease-causing bacteria. Campylobacter, which we learned about last August again, Escherichia coli 0157H7, and Salmonella. I want to point out and stress that these dangerous bacteria can be carried by dairy cattle even when the cattle are healthy, well-managed, pasture-fed, or organically raised. In fact, in the meat industry, we are told to automatically assume that any cattle coming in could have E. coli 0157H7 on its hide or in its GI tract. Dairy production practices admittedly are better than they were 50 years ago. But even when done with great care, they do not ensure that disease-causing bacteria will be absent from the milk. And again, the illness caused by these bacteria is not necessarily trivial. It can kill, it can have lifelong consequences. Now, when unpasteurized milk and dairy products are sold, the expectation is not that the consumer has to do anything more to make that product safe. It's assumed to be safe. It's a ready-to-eat food. This ready-to-eat status magnifies the risk of illness. You could compare it to the risk in a processed meat product in raw meat, which was mentioned earlier. Each year, a handful of outbreaks are epidemiologically linked to raw milk and raw milk products in Wisconsin or nationwide. Now, it's true, and I've heard this on the phone a lot, that the number of outbreaks linked to raw milk products are comparable to the number of outbreaks linked to some other products. We'll hear about spinach, meat, and so on. And I just want to point out that the importance of raw milk products is magnified by the relatively small number of servings that are consumed. So we deal with rates. If the business of selling raw milk expands, we expect the number of outbreaks to expand with it. Pasteurization is the best processing step we've got. It's available to reduce the risk of illness associated with dairy products and to make sure that Wisconsin's products are safe to eat. That's why we have laws and regulations. They're designed to minimize risk. Randy mentioned that other than incidental sales, Wisconsin statutes and regulations have prohibited the sale of unpasteurized milk and dairy products for over 50 years. Those statutes were enacted for compelling public health reasons. Now, I will grant that some of those reasons have changed over the years, but we feel that there are still important public health reasons for the statutes to exist and to be enforced. In the past few years, several producers have sought to expand that incidental sales exemption through things like cow shares, members-only food clubs, and basically create a financially attractive yet illegal business. That's what's led us here today. Randy mentioned the Secretary's Raw Milk Policy Working Group, and I just want to reiterate that we understand the concerns. I've had lots of phone calls, letters, people stopping by. I've heard strong arguments for legalization. I've heard stories of health attributes and so on. And I don't generally argue with people. But you do have testimony from the FDA that has been handed out that deals with many of those health claims and shows you that in the FDA's opinion, and I'll happen to say in mine as well, the science is not there. The peer-reviewed scientific literature is not there supporting the claims that are being made. So we've heard strong arguments for, we've heard strong arguments against, we've heard from the industry, fearful of the industry reputation. We've heard from the public health community. They expect us to be good partners in protecting public health and to reduce the incidence of illness. That's why this working group has been formed. We're trying to hear all the concerns, and rather than have legislation that's driven by one interest alone, see if we can reach consensus. I'm going to deal now with a few things in the bill that I feel are important flaws. First of all, the bills forbid us from specifying any additional requirements for sellers of unpasteurized milk, buttermilk, butter, and cream. We feel that if the major processing step to ensure public health has been taken away, that we need to have some other controls in place to minimize risk. So we cannot support a ban on any additional requirements. We also feel that the bills do not adequately address the sanitary conditions under which the milk is packaged and or processed. I want to point out, it's more than a raw milk bill. It is raw milk plus what we would consider processed dairy products. When you put milk in a bottle, that's processing. When you split it into cream and skim, that's processing. When you make butter and so on, that's processing. Currently, people doing those things have to have a dairy processing plant license with very spelled out sanitation requirements, which are far stricter than what's required on the farm. Now, the bills do mention using a sanitary container prepared in a sanitary manner, filled in a sanitary manner. That's a start, but this is unacceptably vague from our point of view. The bills don't really refer to a whole bunch of other regulatory requirements that are actually involved in making things like butter and cream. Buttermaker's license is legally required in Wisconsin. Butter has to be graded. Processing plants have to be licensed. There's a whole list, 3.5 pages prepared by our legal counsel, listing issues that would have to be addressed. The bills require posting a warning sign for consumers to see. I understand informed consent. I've had an earful about it. I get it. But we feel that the wording of that warning sign is cursory and inadequate, particularly since one of the biggest arguments in favor of legalization is informed consumer consent. Bills also contain language that creates immunity for producers selling unpasteurized milk and dairy products. Now, aside from the fact that putting this in the bill unintentionally acknowledges that the products are potentially hazardous, this provision creates an immune class that is absolutely unprecedented in the food and beverage industry in the United States. Other dairy producers who choose not to do raw milk sales, food processors, do not have this protection. It's an unlevel playing field. So we cannot support the creation of an immune class of food producers in Wisconsin. Finally, whatever happens, if there's a bill passed, there's going to be a cost to our agency. This is not going to be an easy thing to work with, to regulate. There will be a cost, and the bills don't include any provision for funding. Now, I hate to end on the dollar note. We believe that there are important public health reasons to oppose this bill. We believe there are flaws in the bill as written, and I think at this point Randy and I can answer any questions.
Are there questions from the committee? Representative Garthwaite.
Thank you very much for your appearance, and I appreciate your testimony. Some valid points in there. One question I do have, we talked about the illness, in those cases of illness. If either one of you could address the issue, was consumer handling